Iran launched a major ballistic missile attack on Israel today. And in this video, we're going to discuss what Israel's response will be, what Iran's counter response will be, and how this is going to affect the global economy and financial markets. Before we go into our analysis of what we think is going to happen going forward, I want to review a series of very important facts that we're going to have to take into account as we analyze what is going to happen in the future. The first fact that we have to be aware of is that Israel's response to Iran's ballistic missile attack is going to be very different than it was the last time that Iran sent a barrage of ballistic missiles towards Israel. Israel has publicly announced, and several Israeli officials, starting from the prime minister all the way down to a series of civilian and military leaders, have said that Israel's retaliation is going to be severe. The only question is how severe? What sort of targets are Israel going to go after? This is something that we're going to discuss in more detail later in this video. But the first fact that we must come to grips with is that Israel is going to make Iran pay a very heavy price. This was the words of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran will pay the price for attacking Israel. And so that's the first fact that we have to really get our minds around, because last time this happened, there was a little bit of theater where Iran telegraphed their missile launches, and after Israel was able to intercept the missiles, they basically sat back and didn't do anything. That's not going to happen this time. The second fact that we have to be aware of is that the position of the United States of America with regards to Israel's response this time around is going to be very different. Last time, the Biden administration tried to restrain Israel. The Biden administration persuaded Israel to not retaliate against the Iranian response. Last time around, Biden told the Israelis, we were able to protect you. You were able to protect yourselves. There was no damage done. So take the win and move on and don't retaliate against the Iranians. The Israelis listened to Biden and they didn't retaliate. But that's not what's going to happen this time around. The United States has already stated that Israel has a right to retaliate for these attacks. The United States has said that Iran has escalated the conflict by making these attacks. Both Biden and Kamala Harris have said that Israel is going to respond and that they support Israel. In fact, there is every indication that Israel's response is being coordinated with the U.S. military. Therefore, this time around, Israel is going to be at account on a very high degree of support and backing by the United States for a major retaliatory response. The third set of facts that I want to highlight is that the rhetoric coming out of the mouths of Israeli leaders is extremely aggressive. From the Prime Minister of Israel to his various ministers to military leaders, they have all in unison been saying that there's going to be a very severe response. They're saying that Iran made an enormous mistake and that they're going to very much regret that they ever dared to attack Israel with this ballistic missile attack. The rhetoric is very different from what happened the last time Israel was attacked by Iran. And this very much indicates that the Israeli response is going to be very severe. Israeli officials, both civilian and military, would not be going out of their way in making these sort of threats unless they fully intended to follow through. Now, the fourth point that I want to make is really part of the third point, but it's so remarkable that I want to set aside a chapter of its own. Today, the former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, made a series of remarkable statements, both on Twitter and in an interview that he had with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. In this interview, Naftali Bennett said that this was a historic opportunity, and he called it an opportunity for Israel to rewrite the history of the Middle East. He said that this sort of opportunity only comes around once every 50 years, and that Israel had to take advantage of this opportunity. This is very important because in my previous videos on this subject, which I'm linking here, I have pointed out that Israel has been trying to essentially bait the Iranians into attacking them so that the Israelis would have the opportunity to attack Iran. Israel believes, or many Israeli leaders believe, that a war with Iran and with the Islamic regime in particular is inevitable. And they want to have that war during a period in history where Israel still has the strategic upper hand. Once Iran is able to acquire nuclear weapons, Israel will no longer have the strategic upper hand. And that's something that could happen within a few weeks. So when Naftali Bennett is talking about a historic opportunity, he is saying that right now the door is open for Israel. Israel essentially has permission from the United States and the global community to deal a major blow against their mortal enemy, Iran. And that he says, and this is the former prime minister speaking, that Israel must take advantage of this opportunity. And in particular, he mentioned that he wanted three things to happen. The first thing is that he wants Israel to take out all of Iran's oil producing infrastructure. He wants Israel to bomb all of Iran's refineries. He wants Israel to bomb all of Iran's oil rigs, oil producing infrastructure. He wants to cripple the Iranian economy so that no cash is flowing in because it is the cash and oil revenues that Iran has been using to finance its terror network around the world and to finance the acquisition of these sophisticated missiles that it's been launching at Israel. Israel wants to send the Iranian economy back many years. And the way that it needs to do that is by crippling Iran's oil infrastructure. The second thing that Naftali Bennett said that he wants the Israeli government to do is to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, to destroy their nuclear program so that Iran can never, ever threaten Israel with nuclear weapons in the future. This has been a long-standing goal of many Israeli politicians and military leaders, but they haven't had the opportunity to go after Iran's nuclear facilities because Iran had committed direct acts of aggression against Israel. But now Iran made the mistake. And this is going to give Israel the opening that many have been waiting for, which is to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities for good. The third thing that Naftali Bennett said, which dovetails very much with a speech that was made just a couple of days ago by Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister, is that he said that it needs to be Israel's goal to essentially bring about regime change. He says that the goal of Israel should be to take out the regime of the Ayatollahs and the mullahs, to bring about a regime change. And he called upon the people of Iran to overthrow their repressive government. He even said that Israel is going to take on the Islamic regime and as a gift to the Iranian people, to allow the Iranian people the opportunity to free themselves from the yoke of this oppressive regime. Israel has been for many years developing an entire infrastructure of agents and intelligence assets within Iran to foment a civil war and a revolution against the current regime. And I believe that they're going to put those plans in action right now, because Israel's objective is not just to strike a military blow against Iran, because they know that if this regime remains in power, as long as it remains in power, it will always be Israel's mortal enemy, and it will try to come right back after Israel as soon as they can. So Israel needs to take out the Islamic regime. And they know that the majority of the Iranian population doesn't support this regime. So they are going to take extraordinary measures that most people don't even imagine in order to not only defeat Iran militarily, but affect regime change. And this was something that was very blatantly stated by Naftali Bennett, but it was something that was hinted at by the Israeli prime minister just a couple of days before. The fifth and final major fact that I want to bring to your attention before I go into my analysis about what I think is going to happen is that the Iranians have warned the Israelis that if they retaliate, that the next round of strikes against Israel will be much more severe than the first. This is where we have to understand the dilemma that the Israelis face right now, because they know that if they actually strike back at Iran, Iran is going to strike back at Israel. Even though the Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon, they do have thousands of missiles that they can aim at Israel, and that they will aim at Israel, trying to overwhelm their air defenses. And it is virtually certain that if they attack Israel with this level of volume, that some significant number of missiles will actually get through and penetrate their defenses and cause major damage. And so we know, because the Iranians have already threatened so, that if the Israelis retaliate, Iran will take severe countermeasures. So let's take these facts that I've just stated together with another series of facts, particularly a series of facts that I've covered in some of my previous videos, which I really encourage you to watch, because they're very detailed videos that discuss the strategic elements of this conflict, and which enabled me to essentially forecast or predict that there would be a high likelihood of a war between Iran and Israel. So let's now focus on what we think might actually happen in the next few days. How severe will the Israeli response be? That's the big question right now. Will Israel pursue a limited response, hoping that Iran won't then escalate, or will Israel go big? Will Israel decide to go big? That's the big question right now. In my view, there are three important reasons why Israel is most likely going to go big. Now, the first reason I've already alluded to. The fact of the matter is that Israel is going to go big because this was their plan all along. Their plan all along has been to draw Iran into a conflict with Israel before Iran actually has a nuclear weapon, so that Israel can take out Iran's nuclear capabilities. This has been Israel's intention all along. And the Israelis know that in order to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, they are going to have to mount a massive attack. Now, the second reason is very closely related to the first, because Israel has always known that if it mounts an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, that the counter strike by Iran would be massive. Now, what do I mean by massive? By massive, I mean that Iran has the capability of launching thousands of ballistic missiles towards Israel that could potentially overwhelm its air defenses and overwhelm its Iron Dome defense. Therefore, Israel cannot afford to allow Iran to launch massive counterattack. What does this mean? That Israel, if it's going to launch an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, it also has to mount a massive attack on the entirety of Iran, such that it cripples Iran's ability to respond, that it cripples Iran's ability to mount a counterattack. So Israel can't just do a surgical strike to try to take out Iran's nuclear facilities. It has to massively degrade Iran's capacity to respond. That means electronic warfare. It means trying to take out the entire command structure, if possible, of the Iranian military leadership, to take out the political leadership. They have to launch massive strikes on military facilities where there might be missile launchers all over the country. That is very important to understand because a lot of people seem to think that going after Iran's nuclear facilities is something that can be done surgically. Israel isn't dumb. They know that if they do that, the Iranians will respond by trying to launch thousands of missiles at them. And if they do, a lot of those missiles are likely to get through their defenses. Therefore, Israel has to go big and they have to shock Iran. They have to massively degrade their capacity to respond. Now, the third reason that I think that Israel is going to go big in his response is that essentially Israel right now has a green light on the part of the majority of the international community to attack Iran harshly, and in particular, to attack Iran's military infrastructure and even its nuclear facilities. But it has to be done massively and quickly because that support can and will erode over time. Over time, the stomach that the international community is going to have in allowing Israel to just massively bombard Iran, causing lots of civilian casualties. Israel won't be able to do that for a prolonged period of time before the international community starts complaining and asking Israel and demanding that Israel cease its war on Iran. Therefore, the damage that Israel needs to be done now, and it needs to be done quickly. That's why I believe that the attack that Israel is about to mount on Iran will be absolutely massive in scale. Now, the next thing that we have to analyze is what is Iran's counter response going to be once Israel retaliates? Whether Israel's retaliation be extremely massive, as I am predicting, or whether it be more limited. In my opinion, the Iranian response is also going to be massive, and it may take the world by surprise. I think there's really two possibilities here. One possibility is that the Israelis manage to strike a knockout blow on the Iranians, that the attack by Israel on Iran is so massive and it's so decisive. They managed to take out, for example, Israel's leadership. They managed to take out most of their their military capabilities. If Israel can mount a knockout blow against Iran, then Iran may not respond, or the response may end up being very weak. However, I think that that's a little bit of wishful thinking. I think it's very difficult to believe that even if Israel mounts the largest attack that they can possibly muster without using nuclear weapons, that Iran will not respond. And so what I think is going to happen is that when Iran realizes that it's facing an existential threat, an existential military threat, and an existential political threat, because remember, the prime minister has said it and the former prime minister has said it. The objective of Israel right now is to effect regime change. This is an existential threat that the Islamic regime realizes that it is facing. In the face of this type of existential threat, I think that Iran will early on pull out its ace cards that holds. I don't think that it can wait very long before it pulls out these ace cards. Sure, it's going to mount some massive missile strikes as strongly as it can against the Israelis. They'll try to get their other allies, Yemen and whoever else in the region, to also launch rockets and missiles at Israel. But the main ace card that the Iranians have are two things. First, to shut down traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, particularly any oil tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran can do this. They have the capability of doing it. If they do it, it will cause oil prices to go above $200 a barrel, perhaps up to $300 a barrel. This would cause the global economy and global markets to crash relatively quickly. What does Iran hope to accomplish by doing this? The devastation to the global economy will be so great, other countries around the world won't be able to take it. And so there will be enormous international pressure to bring an end to the war. And what does this mean? The pressure is going to be on Israel because Israel is the party that is going to be winning the war. They're going to be the party that is trying to finish off the job. And basically, in order to prevent Israel from finishing off the job, completely destroying Iran's military, completely destroying their economy, and bringing about regime change, the Iranians hope to bring the rest of the world to their rescue by saying, hey, we'll open the Strait of Hormuz back up. We can get oil flowing back through there again, but you need to stop Israel. That is what they're hoping for. That's what they're hoping to do by trying to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. The second thing that they're going to do is just a complementary strategy. They will attack oil producing facilities and oil transport infrastructure throughout the region. They've already said that they would do this. So in countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, those facilities are facilities that, with the sophistication of Iranian weaponry, they can take out those facilities. And that again would cause a major disruption in global oil supplies at a time when global oil supplies are extremely low. In the United States right now, commercial inventories are at a seasonal 5-year low. They're getting to very dangerously low levels. And in Cushing, which is the most important set of inventory storage in the United States, they're getting very close to tank bottoms and they're very close to 10-year seasonal lows. So a disruption in oil supplies couldn't be happening at a worse possible time. And the Iranians know this, and they know that if they're able to disrupt global oil supplies at this particular time, that the response on the part of oil prices in the oil market will be huge, that it'll cause a massive spike in oil prices. That massive spike in oil prices will cause massive inflation around the world, and it'll cause recessions all over the world. And this economic damage in turn will cause global governments to try to restrain the Israelis and try to get the Israelis to not finish off the job. So let's briefly review the two possibilities in terms of an Iranian counter response. In the first scenario, Iran won't really be able to respond because Israel was able to deliver a knockout blow. But in the more likely second scenario, Iran will respond massively with a direct attack on Israel, but more importantly, they will respond by trying to block the Strait of Hormuz and perhaps by trying to attack oil facilities in the region. So let's now focus on what the impact of all of this is going to be on global economies and global financial markets. I've already alluded to the risk here, which is that if Iran disrupts global oil supplies by blocking passage through the Strait of Hormuz or by attacking oil facilities in the region, this will cause a massive spike in oil prices, which will cause global inflation, global recessions around the world. That is the risk. That is not something that necessarily will happen, but this is actually a very significant risk. And in my view, there's more than a 50% probability at this point that something like this is going to happen. Because as I mentioned before, I do believe that the Iranians are going to be able to mount some sort of a counterstrike. I don't think that Israel will be able to deal a knockout blow. And therefore, the Iranians will resort to using their ace card, which is to try to create a massive spike in global oil prices. Now, let's look at what's going to happen to global financial markets. Here, this is really catching global financial markets off guard. The U.S. market is practically at all-time highs in terms of the equity markets. Clearly, the equity markets are taking the risk of a major recession or major inflation seriously. Now, as I said before, there's no guarantee that these bad scenarios will happen, but I believe that there is a very high probability, probably in excess of 50%, that this sort of scenario would happen. And the market isn't discounting this at all. The market, by looking at market prices, you can see that the market isn't assigning more than a 5% probability that this could actually happen. So therefore, I think that markets right now are extremely mispriced and that there's a lot of really attractive opportunities in terms of potential asymmetric returns that are being offered in the market right now because of the fact that the market isn't taking this threat seriously. In addition, the market is badly mispositioned. Bullish sentiment is extremely high as measured by various indicators. In addition, CTAs are positioned extremely long. They've been chasing the momentum of the market all the way up to these all-time highs. If the market starts to decline and falls back through technical supports, breaking that momentum, this will trigger massive selling on the part of these CTAs and other traders that have been jumping on the momentum for the last couple of weeks. So the market is extremely vulnerable right now to massive flash crash type of a scenario. And I have a previous video on how flash crashes occur. And right now the market is really set up to have a pretty significant flash crash of 5 to 10%. Now, beyond that type of a 5 to 10% corrective flash crash, we actually have the possibility of a bear market if markets start discounting the possibility of a recession as a result of this massive spike in oil prices that might happen. Now, the markets aren't pricing this in right now, but that's where this market is really offering very interesting opportunities that come around very, very rarely. And so that's the final thing that I want to talk about. How do we turn this crisis into an opportunity? For this very reason, I am actually launching a new service. A few years ago when COVID came around, I launched a product in which I was able to earn for myself, the subscribers that were able to subscribe early on into that service, several thousand%. We're in a situation that's extremely similar right now. This is that type of an opportunity that there are potential gains of hundreds of percent. Money can be doubled, tripled, quadrupled, possibly even more because of the fact that financial markets aren't taking this threat seriously. Just like the threat of COVID wasn't being taken seriously at that particular time, the threat right now of major oil spikes and a major global recession as a result of the oil spikes that could be brought about by this war, because the market isn't taking this seriously enough, there are some major, major opportunities to make money if, in fact, the Israelis respond as I believe they will, and if the Iranians are able to actually mount the sort of counter attack that I'm expecting, which is one which is actually going to disrupt global oil supply. So I'm leaving a link there to this new service that I'm just now starting. It's a very special service. It's mainly going to trade options, and it will also trade in some stocks and some ETFs. But it's the type of portfolio that's meant to hit home runs, to make major gains, to make once in a lifetime gains. This isn't going to be your conservative portfolio. I have a conservative portfolio. It's called Successful Portfolio Strategy. It's a separate service, one that I obviously believe in a great deal, but this is a more conservative type of a service. This new service that I'm launching is one that is intended to generate gains of 100% or more, much more potential. And so check it out. The information is there and you'll decide. But during the COVID crisis, this was extremely successful. We were able to implement some extremely successful strategies. So I'm going to be recording videos very often, possibly every day, at least every other day for the next few days, to follow up on this story that I've been talking about on this channel for many months. If you go back and look at my videos, I was predicting a very strong possibility of a war between Israel and Iran since several months ago and since the beginning of last year in my written work on Seeking Alpha, and to my clients in my service, Successful Portfolio Strategy. I've been talking about the very high probability of a war between Iran and Israel before the next presidential election. And here we are. Now is the opportunity to take advantage of this situation. We don't want war. We don't want the destruction, the death, the devastation that's going to happen. But our job is to keep our heads straight. And if there's an opportunity to capitalize on this, that is my job. And that's what I'm going to do. And so in this service, I basically show you my portfolio. I show you what I'm doing, and people can just decide for themselves whether that's the type of investment they would like to make, if that's the type of trade they would like to make, and they can do it. I don't make any recommendations. I simply show you what I'm doing. And in the process of showing you what I'm doing, I teach you how I do it, why I do it. And then you can make decisions for yourself if that's appropriate for you. It's a very affordably priced service, given the sophistication of the service, given the fact that on one trade, you can make 10 times more than the cost of the service. So check it out and subscribe to this channel, because as I said, in the next few days, I'm going to be recording continuously, bringing you up to date on what's happening with this crisis. But more importantly, I'm one of the only analysts out there that's going to be talking about how this crisis actually impacts the economy and financial markets. There's going to be other geopolitical analysts that are going to give you a lot of opinion about politics, about geopolitics, about military stuff. And a lot of those analysts are really good. But I'm going to integrate that sort of analysis with what's going to happen to the global economy and what's going to happen to global financial markets. So I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and to subscribe to my services. Thank you.